Welcome, world. As season 2 comes to a close here at Concrete and Blossom Podcast, we aren't close to our finish. We are still striving to create change through conversations, and we have some new seeds to plant. I'm one of your favorite creator and host, Dawn the Doll, and I have a new voice joining me on the platform. She plans to stick around too. Meet us here every season for Let's Talk with LadyK. As Black female educator, creative, screen and ghostwriter, Kalaiah Vaughn plants fire seeds in our Concrete and Blossom garden.
Dawn the Doll delivers.
How are you, friend?
Girl, I'm amazing. I can't complain.
Oh my goodness, it's been years.
I know. I graduated, in 2008?
Yes.
So, yeah, probably 2008, 2009, we could say, was the last time we talked, yeah.
Yep, about 09-ish. Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for carving out some time on a Sunday for us.
Man, thank y'all for having me.
No problem. So, Kitchen Talk with LadyK. Talk to me, because it came out of nowhere. And from the very first one, I was like, first of all, life. Hello, life. My entire being. It touches so many topics so quickly. It's very relevant and relatable.
Thank you.
Relevant and relatable. And it's very raw. I love that.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I'm just trying to position my camera. Okay, so I how did Kitchen Talk come about? Literally, one of my dear, she's the neighbor / friend. She and I were always talking, and she's like, "Yo, you need a podcast. You need a podcast." And I've heard that from a lot of my friends. Because a lot of my friends, like especially with quarantine, I've reconnected with some people. I've been able to catch up with some people, and so people are like, "Oh, you need a podcast." And I'm like, "Oh, well, we just having a conversation. We shooting the breeze. We kicking it. You know what I mean?" Mm-hmm. And I'm very big on like God sending us confirmation through different avenues. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, if I'm consistently hearing this from people, and I think for me, the big, like, no, maybe you really should do something. My neighbor, like I said, I moved into my studio where I am now in March. And so she and I did not start hanging out till probably June or July. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this girl's known me for like 3 months. And she's told me this. I said, maybe if she's saying the same thing that my friends since like 9th grade have been saying, then maybe, listen, everybody can't be telling the same lie. Maybe I need to.
Like everybody else. Sometimes
yeah.
Work closely.
So,
okay.
This is where we are.
Well, that's really amazing just because no one ever really said maybe that I needed a podcast, but I got my confirmation in realizing the changes and the growth that I needed to make. Mm-hmm. And having a podcast honestly forces me to make those changes in a lot of ways, just in being able to get a very pure, well-intended message out that may not always be put out the best way otherwise. And now here with my podcast, I'm able to do that both ways because I can still tell you exactly what I mean. And sometimes it requires me to say exactly what the fuck I mean. But it's my podcast, so I can do that. And, I have those shows where, I have a group of people or it's me and one other person. And it's a real conversation like that. And that other person, that's kind of their lane as well. And it just feels good to be able to, again, get those messages out. So, yes, your message come through at the table. So there's a couple of them that I just absolutely love.
Okay.
And it just jumps right in. I mean, literally, you just hit them dead in the face with every single one. It's like, oh, that's what we're talking about? Okay, I'm ready. That's what we're talking about. So
that's the Dallas way. That's the Dallas way.
Dallas way. You know what I always forget? Because we met in Houston,
yes.
I forget that you're from Dallas.
Right, because like when we were in college in Houston, it was like, you from Dallas? Like, oh, it was like real life, like Color Purple, like, oh my God, somebody is from. So yeah, it was a real thing. Yeah.
I always forget that, but I know one of them that had me kind of cracking up laughing was the one that you said that you were talking about men also benefiting from abortion laws and abortion rules and, pro or, everything like that. So that's really interesting. Talk to us about that. Where was that inspiration drawn from to just touch on that topic like that?
Absolutely. So so just a disclaimer, like I consume probably an hour and a half to 2 hours of news a day. Like I don't really like to watch the news. I prefer to just read it. Maybe it's because I was an English major. I don't know. But anyway, there's been a lot of talk on the Hill, right, Capitol Hill, about if Amy Coney gets confirmed to the Supreme Court that Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito will then have another partner, right, to form this trifecta where they can effectively try to dissemble Roe v. Wade. Now, like, to be clear, I didn't get a chance to say all this on the tape, but like, I'm both pro-life and pro-choice. Like, I'm pro-life for my uterus. I'm pro-choice to everybody else's, because yes, while I can advocate, have a kid, I'm also not going to provide childcare services. I'm not going to give pampers to the baby. I'm not doing any of those things. So I can say that from a very almost idealistic standpoint if I'm telling somebody else to have a baby. So I'm a firm believer that like the real headline is not in who's talking, it's in who's being quiet. Because the quiet person, that's really where the story is, right? And so I noticed like when you hear this Roe v. Wade, you see the same people out there campaigning. You'll see doctors who are advocating for women to be able to have the right to abort pregnancies. You will see women out there. You always have some gay men that come and join in the fight because they tend to be allies for women and champion women's causes. And then on the other side, of course, you will have these very conservative people, the religious right, who are saying it's a sin, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. I got to thinking about it like, well, who's being quiet? You never hear anything from straight men. You don't. Right? And if you do, excluding like the justices and the legal powers that be, I'm talking about just regular, smegular, everyday straight men, they're really quiet. And I'm just like...
Those that are fathers and those that aren't fathers, actually. Now, you have even brought it up. I started thinking, and I'm like, that's so true. And it's true because even from those fathers, whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, because I definitely agree with your stance. And I would say that's more of my stance too. I mean, I've never been put in that situation to where I had to do anything like that. I couldn't imagine having to go through that or having to choose that for whatever reason, whether it just be not the right time or a bad situation. But whether it be fathers who are really like pro-life and don't do it, even though it was the worst thing at that time and now it's the best, or, the men who are not fathers who just either way have a firm opinion on it. That's interesting.
Yeah, I was just like, I know too many men who giving their girlfriend or a side chick or partner $600 and be like, this ain't the time for that. Like, I know too many men. You understand? Like, so I was just like, they benefit from abortion because we all know, like, it takes two people to parent a child. So I'm just like, y'all benefit. So why are you so quiet? And then I guess the other side to that is, okay, let's say worst case scenario, Roe v. Wade is overturned. So since y'all are so pro-life, are you providing free? Are you going to make childcare free across the country for everyone? Right. Are you going to provide free milk and free Pampers, like until the child is like fully potty trained? Are you going to provide clothes? Are you going to provide housing assistance? Like because if you're really pro-life,
or even on a deeper level, are you going to provide free counseling and therapy sessions if the relationship and that parenting relationship is not where it should be?
Absolutely.
When co-parents can't maybe cohabitate together or really work together for the benefit of that child, are you going to then put in things in? Are you going to put systems in place to make sure that child, even the mental health? Because we've seen even where you could be a happy couple, and if it's not the right time for a child, things get dismantled.
Everything,
right? Yeah. And so
the other thing I was going to say too, like for the religious right, I guess my question is, and this is where I have an issue. Well, number one, like just legally, we have a separation of church and state. Correct. So I find it troubling that you're going to use religion to dictate what the state can and cannot do. But okay, I'll play along. Let's say that's your logic. Are you going to outlaw all these couples who are not married that live together? Mm-hmm. Are you going to penalize people for having children before they get married? Mm-hmm. Are you going to start incarcerating men who cheat on their wives? Like, because if we're really going to go up the religious hill, if we're going to climb that religious mountain, okay, it's a rough mountain climb. Yeah. Okay. So let's because you don't get to pick and choose.
Right.
Which sins are just so unforgivable that you have to legislate. Like, so I just feel like more than anything, it's about control. I think it gives them a ground, a place to to just be bigoted under this guise of religiosity, which I don't necessarily agree with either. You know, so it's an interesting argument. I will say these next couple of months of the Supreme Court are going to be some of the most interesting months that we've seen. A lot hinges on this election, a lot.
And I think that people don't realize that the election is bigger than just the one at the White House. There's other names on that ballot that are much more important than that one be-all, say-all name. And I think in the Black community that is not maybe talked about enough, because you hear election and everybody just thinks that every 4 years, that particular election. You know? So I think that's really important for people to understand that there are other names on the ballot. You need to do your research on the candidates. You need to do your research on your local, your city officials, then your state officials. You know what I mean? Like you really have to kind of do your part, your due diligence.
You do.
Especially for women, I think, especially with it being 2020, 100 years of women's right to vote being enforced. And I think that a lot of women should take it a lot more seriously. I just have a few friends, or I will say a few people that I know, and I'm sure many more millions that we would never know. Mm-hmm. They don't take it serious. They feel like, what for? They feel like, it's almost as if they don't realize how much their vote really does matter. It's kind of just like, if it doesn't go in their way, for instance, this whole last 4 years definitely didn't go in the way of any of the people that I would be referring to.
Right.
So I get it that it didn't go in our favor that time. And there's been times in the past where we didn't have maybe somebody necessarily directly in our favor. But it still matters, again, because there's more than just that name on the ballot. That name is not the only name that matters. So
I just feel like it's very easy, I think, particularly for Black people, to operate from emotion rather than logic, right? And so because I feel disenchanted with Joe Biden, because I feel disenchanted because Hillary Clinton won a popular vote but didn't win the White House, because I still feel disenchanted because Al Gore won the popular vote and didn't win the White House. I feel disenchanted that Barack Obama is no longer able to run. So because I feel that way, I'm not going to vote. And I think that's one of the disadvantages we have from a political standpoint. We operate from a place of feelings. And I will say this, we do plenty of things we don't want to do as a people. Many of us don't feel like going to work every day, but we go. We don't feel like paying taxes, but we pay them, right? So you have to get beyond your feelings. And I think far too often, because we are so driven by emotion, we only vote if candidates are able to engage us, if they're able to entertain us, if they're able to sway us, if they're able to cause this like fervor, then we'll vote. And to his credit, Barack Obama did a lot of that. But the reality of it is, I think Barack Obama represents that one teacher you'll have in high school that is absolutely amazing. And you will never have another teacher again like that. So you enjoy it while you have it. And then when it's time to go to class, you still go to class because ultimately your goal is to graduate. Right. And so I think that's probably the best way I can describe Barack Obama. Like, he's that unicorn professor. He's that unicorn teacher that really made you excited to learn. He inspired you to learn, inspired you to want to be great. And when he retires, you still have to continue to learn because learning is a lifelong process. I think we have to start approaching it from that standpoint. We can't always be looking for the next Barack Obama. Like we just, and I think that's the problem too. Like with Black voters, we're looking for the next Barack Obama.
Right. As Black voters, to be honest with you, it's really disheartening for me because I think a lot of Black voters still are finding a reason to even discredit and be disenchanted by Kamala Harris. You know, I think that's it's just very disheartening is the best word that I have for it, because this is probably, I would say, within our lifetime, just because Barack Obama, it was very special. It was very planned, and I don't mean by any human entity.
Yeah.
That it was time for that.
Absolutely.
I would also say just being realistic and seeing the climate of the country right now, where we are as a people, the chain of events that has happened recently, even just within the year 2020, which is still, we're just in the last quarter, we're just in that home stretch.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times, you know, we get stuck in this cycle of always looking for something to be wrong. And then we use that whatever we found is wrong as the excuse of why we stay where we are. And so I think that within our lifespan, it's just important to realize that Barack Obama was an exception to a rule that has been mandated by our country. And that is a country of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
When we saw that and saw the hope that came with it, again, it's like that teacher. I see the hope of maybe I don't have to always be the only what I know. Maybe it doesn't always have to be the same thing as what I've been fed. There is something different. It was such a burst of hope at a moment that we needed it. And again, now that he's unable to run again, now that we're not able to have someone on the very forefront in that manner, you know, again, people are just finding reasons to still say, oh, well, this is not good enough. And I think that it's very disturbing that we even want to discredit it and say, oh, we're back to the lesser of two evils. I think that's very, very divisive to say, because right now we don't need to look at anything from such a pessimistic. I feel like that's a very pessimistic way of looking at the entire political running right now, is by saying, okay, well, we're back to the lesser of two evils. Well, I only see one evil at hand. And I think that it is very distracting to now just say, okay, well, now we don't have nobody again. Because yes, we do. We have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and we better do something to make sure they get in there.
This is what I'll say. I do agree. I am one of those people who feel like Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils. I do think that. However, I will say this. The difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is that because Kamala Harris is his running mate, because Joe Biden has a black woman as a campaign manager, because he's already been held to the fire for his treatment of Anita Hill, he's going to be very careful of how he treats black people publicly going forward. Because Joe Biden, many of us were introduced to him as the right hand to President Barack Obama.
Correct.
So, you know, I mean, and to be fair, I can be frank, I am not a fan of Joe Biden. I never have been. You know, because I'm of the opinion that Joe Biden isn't really as much of an ally to black people as he likes to paint himself to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, because we can never forget what he did not do for Anita Hill. And so I'm of the opinion that the way you treat the person that you feel you don't need reveals your true character. So in 1992, when he saw that black girl at the Senate committee hearing, he felt like he didn't need that black girl. So he didn't advocate for her in the manner that he should have, and he's admitted this. Years later, you know, about a year or two ago, he still didn't give her the apology that she needed.
I was going to say it was years later whenever we got, it was almost like a backhanded apology, because
it was, and that's exactly what she called it.
To be able to continue on his goal of political.
Absolutely. And so, you know, I look at his treatment of Michelle Obama. He knew he had to treat her the right way, or else any political aspirations he had were going to be left at the Obama administration. They were never going to go any further than that. So I said all that to say this. At this point, this is where logic comes into play. I don't like Joe Biden. I don't. I don't feel like he really is a fan of black women in the way that he advocates himself to be. I do think his
black people, not just black women, especially, but black people.
Yeah, particularly black, right. And then I do feel like, you know, Kamala Harris, she's convenient, you know. Now, this isn't to discredit her intelligence or her resume or her ability to do the job, because she's incredibly competent. Let me say that. She can most certainly do the job.
It's his only way in, though.
Absolutely. But Joe Biden fully understands. You know, I mean, but Joe Biden, you know, at the end of the day, he's still white. And history has shown us, listen, white people, they know who to get to come for the cleanup. And I feel like in many ways, Kamala Harris represents the struggle of many Black women in America, in that our professional accolades, our abilities are overlooked until the powers that be, more often than not white men, have made an entire mess of everything. And so then you come get us to come in there and fix everything. Barack Obama, as brilliant as he is, he was a glorified cleanup man for a lot of white people, because, listen, Bush had done such a horrible job. White people were like, well, it cannot get worse than this. We have nothing else to lose. Let's just cast our cares, cast our ballot for this man, because what we've seen can't be any worse. Mm-hmm. And I think Kamala Harris is the same thing. You know what I'm saying? I think because Barack Obama was so successful, it sends the message politically that when things get really, 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 really horrible, then we'll get a Black candidate. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what I see. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate, but it's the way of corporate America. It's the way of education.
Absolutely.
When things get really bad.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's bring in this Black woman to be the reading specialist. Let's bring in this Black person for special education. Let's bring in this Black principal. Mm-hmm. When it gets really bad. But as soon as it's going well, you may or may not still be here.
Right. Mm-hmm. We're going to move y'all around. We're going to shuffle you a little bit.
Absolutely.
And make sure that by the time it gets better, we're going to make sure we got the right pictures in place. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you were an English major.
Yes.
Back at U of H.
I was.
South and so with that, now you are doing screenwriting. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that. What are some of the projects that you have been a part of and some that you're working on that we can look forward to?
So currently, the only project I've been a part of, actually, I was a part of as an actress. So I did an independent film in 2020. In 2019, I did an independent film. And then everything other than that, I've just been developing my body of work, because in order to secure a literary agent, they want to see a body of work. And so that's what I've been doing. And then in the meantime, in between time, I still have my hand in the education field. So I educate by day, I screenwrite by night, still going to meetings, still networking. What I have found is that the reality of it is it takes probably easily at least half a decade, if not a decade, before you really get your big break, before you really get a seat at that proverbial table. Mm-hmm. I also enter in pretty much every screenwriting competition I possibly can. And then I do have an entertainment lawyer. I have a lawyer that I talk to frequently, that gives me advice, that tells me, no, don't do this, do that. So all of those things are working together. The other part is that because I'm not an English major, because I'm not a screenwriting major, I didn't go to a film school, I represent a growing demographic of people who are self-taught screenwriters. You do have people like Shonda Rhimes, who went to USC and did a phenomenal job as a student. And then, of course, everything we see that she makes is phenomenal. But then you also have people like your Spike Lees of the world, like your Ava DuVernays of the world, who do not come from that industry, mm-hmm. who then decide to make that switch. So I'm more on that side of it all, where I'm writing films now because I feel that's what I just really want to do. Like that's my route to telling stories. So, yeah.
Okay. And so Kitchen Talk with LadyK. With that, so podcast coming soon.
Listen, I think that might be the next logical step. Is that it needs to be
you are more than welcome to come on our Content Blossom platform anytime for practice.
Okay, thank you.
You can co-host if you got something that you just really want to put out there and you have other voices that you need. We can definitely get you set up, because I'm telling you, whenever I listen to them and they're just so spot on with like current day things. And I think that that's important, because I think that the more that we talk about it in actual relatable ways. Yes. And the younger that people are that are talking about it in relatable ways, I think that's how we create sustainability. Absolutely. Because right now that's what we don't have, in my opinion. Right. In the Black community, especially. Because
we don't have anyone young that's really talking about current issues. And I know, like, a lot of people, I was excited when Amanda Seales was on The Real. And I was like, oh, okay. Because The Real, and this is not to discredit those ladies, it was okay for me, but it didn't have enough substance for me to want to tune in every day. So
And when we say substance, I would just even say, because I don't follow the show like daily, but when I see it, I couldn't agree with you more. But when I think of substance, it's not that you guys don't have good topics. It's not that they don't even give good perspectives. I think that the people that they have on there are very used to being poised. So they may sometimes actually, to me, it's what I say, tiptoe around what they really say, because they want to say it so politically correct. They don't want to have to then backtrack or anything like that. And I think Amanda Seales, just out the door, is, these are my beliefs, this is what I know, these are the facts, etc. And so her realness is definitely meant for a platform like that.
Yeah, I think, like, the other thing of it too, you have to consider who you have on that stage, right? You have a child actress turned talk show host. You have an engineer turned comedian turned talk show host. Jeannie Mai was a makeup artist for a lot of celebrities turned talk show host. And then you also have Adrian, a child star, a Disney star turned talk show host. And that's not to say that you can't be any of those things and also provide relevant commentary on social and political issues, because you can.
Absolutely.
But that is to say that the lack of commentary that really had substance, commentary that really was definitively one way or the other, that type of commentary was lacking just because the host that you have, that's not their wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. And so when you have someone like Amanda Seales come on, who is, Ivy League educated, who has her pulse on social and political issues, and who can provide a much more concrete, a bit more of a logical, a bit more, I'll even say educated view on certain topics. I do think that the reality of it is, I don't know that show, that door was big enough for her to walk through. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not a diss to the show, because their brand, just being real, and at their core, what we see is who they really are. You know what I'm saying? And then you have someone like Amanda Seales, who probably reads bell hooks, who probably has read the autobiography of Malcolm X, who probably immerses herself in all types of womanist and feminist literature. Her perspective is going to be very different than people who just talk about these things on the side. Mm-hmm. So, it's apples to oranges, I think. But, I do miss her. I do miss that brand, because when you look at talk shows, other than The View, you don't have a group of educated women sitting around discussing pertinent issues. We had that with Oprah when Oprah was on the air, right? Oprah had, and whatever Oprah didn't know, she would call in the best experts, mm-hmm. And they would come in and stand in the gap and give us their expertise and do a wonderful job at it. But we don't necessarily have that now. Like, we don't have that very astute voice. We don't have it anywhere, I think, on TV.
I could definitely agree with you. Absolutely. The ladies on The Real, I think that, and even The View, the few times that I have watched it, when they address the issues that are happening, I just think that it should be more geared towards putting facts out than opinions out.
Yeah.
And that's why they kind of lose me on those shows a little bit, because it's more of the feels, how they feel about certain things versus actual facts of things. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with things that they are told that they can and can't say, can and can't do. They absolutely know their lines, how to walk them very carefully. So I would absolutely agree with you on that.
And the other thing I say about The Real is kind of surprising, a lot of those women are highly educated. I think one of them was like a lawyer, I want to say. Mm-hmm. I think not The Real, I'm sorry, The View. The thing about The View too, I think people watch that show to see those women argue, mm-hmm. to be quite frank. Mm-hmm. People like the debate. They like the banter. They don't necessarily come to be educated. I think they come to watch them argue.
Show.
Yeah, and I like the show. Like, I'm a fan. I watch it. So I know for me, I'm curious to see just what are they going to say.
Right, the perspectives.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier And just that quickly, because it's always so good, I forget exactly what the topic was, but you mentioned something about having control. And not too long ago, I did an episode with a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine, actually. Shout out to Leah of Take Up Space Podcast and Mr. D713 of Everything Culture. That's everything with A. And we had an episode, and it was based on having control without being in control. Mm-hmm. So when you hear that, how does that kind of resonate with you?
I think it resonates with me on a personal level as a screenwriter, because I'll just be very transparent. I have had a lot of screenwriting contests come my way, and I did not enter them because when you read the fine print, you're giving up your creative control. And screenwriting, there are different levels of control. Like the reason why Shonda Rhimes almost exclusively does things for television is because in television, the writer is king. So if I say Dawn the doll, her character wears gray t-shirts and black Converse on every episode, then that's what the wardrobe department is going to buy, because that's what the writer put in the script. Film is very different. With film, I can say that, but then the director gets hold of the script and say, no, she's very much a black pencil dress and Louboutin pump type woman, so that's what she's going to wear. They have the ability to change everything from the minute to the major in your script because the director is king. So I think for me, just understanding and just learning the different levels of control and figuring out how I fit into those pictures, it's been very eye-opening for me, because I do want to write stories that focus on different aspects of Black culture. I do want to write stories that have Black people as lead characters, very much so. And so just understanding how the game works, just understanding how things, the politics of everything, you'll be surprised, at how many people, they may be the face of the company, but they really don't have any control. Case in point, when you look at the Real Housewives, right? Andy Cohen, listen, he calls a lot of shots. The other thing is not just Andy Cohen, but there are people who we'll never see who work in the background, that they're the background to his foreground, that make a lot of decisions. We look at Nene Leakes, her recent departure from the show. They had been trying to push her out for years. And it wasn't until her contract was written in such a way that she felt like there was no coming back from it that she decided to not return. But that just goes to show you would think that someone with her type of staying power, with her type of ability to bring in fans would have all of this power, and she didn't. Yep. It's a reason why Tyler Perry owns the studio, owns the production lot, owns the cameras, owns the sets, owns the script. It's a reason why. Mm-hmm. Because as a Black creative, you have to be very careful about the projects you choose to take, and you have to be very careful about what you choose to do. I'll finish that by saying this. I'll never forget, I was watching the episode of The Breakfast Club, and they had Diamond from Crime Mob on there. And Charlamagne asked her, like, how come you're not on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta? Because you want to, you a rapper, you from Atlanta, like you. She's like, oh, they definitely asked. And she was like, I just decided not to, because with reality TV, unless you have a post-production title, you have no power, because post-production, those are the people that do the editing. Those are the people that package that show into that 45 or 60 minutes to go onto your television screen. Those are the people that edit the reunion episodes. So that's really where all the power is when you start talking about live TV or reality TV. It's with the post-production team. And she said, that means they can paint you to be whatever they want you to be. And she said, that just didn't sit well with me. So I just chose not to do it. And that stuck with me, because I was like, okay, you have to be selective, even if that means not being seen for a while. You just have to be very selective.
So you have to be intentional.
Highly intentional.
Intentional, yeah. And how you're seen. I think that's really big, because I have a couple of episodes with a couple music artists, and it was really a dose of music is medicine, because I think that music is life, right? I think that music was meant to make people feel, and I think that music is one of the most beautiful things that us as human beings can get our hands on tangibly, right?
Absolutely.
And so I did a thing called Music is Medicine, and I think that being intentional and understanding what you take on, when you take it on, making sure that you're ready to take it on. I did an episode with an artist, Twain Lowe, called Passion or Pit Stop. And I think that sometimes happens as well in reality TV, in film, in television, and things like that. It's just people, it's not a passion, so it becomes a pit stop very easily because you're not intentional with these things, with your goals. You're not intentional about reevaluating them. You're not intentional about making sure that when you step out there and how you're seen is controlled in some type of way, because you want to make sure that when you get out there, you don't have to backpedal. And we see it a lot with people having to come back and make apologies and everything like that. But then we also see some people, they stand on what they say because that's what they meant. And that's because they have control over it. So I think that that's really important, just being intentional, especially in the writing world, in the creative world. I think it's more important there, but we see it all the time in corporate worlds too. Like, I have to be intentional as an educator. So even sometimes when it comes to my podcast, I have a post-production team, and we make sure, because sometimes my conversation is very organic. A lot of times, like now, I don't have anything planned to talk about. I knew I loved what I hear. I knew I felt inspired by hearing you speak. And I knew that if I felt inspired, why not put your voice on a platform that is already created, so that way people can feel inspired as well by the same thing that I've been privy to hear just by following you on Instagram as a friend, you know? And so it's like, I have to cut some of that stuff out because sometimes it is not pretty. And sometimes I have to realize that even though that's how I live personally, so I have to make sure that what I do finally put out there in my final episodes that are on,
absolutely,
everybody can get their hands on. I have full control over that. I have make sure that everything I've heard before it gets out there, even whenever I don't necessarily have the time to go and sit with them and book studio time to help them with that post-production, I still got to make sure that it's going to be out there, right? Because I know how the education system is, and I've seen people get fired for less.
Literally. And so I think that's huge. I think one bit of advice I would give anybody who's like an aspiring screenwriter, aspiring director, producer, right now, before you get famous, go through all your social media channels and delete things that you feel like might be offensive or inflammatory, or hide them, or whatever you need to do. But delete those things now, because to your point, you have to be very intentional about where you're going, and you don't want to be seen as somebody that has to backtrack. Like, I can be honest, like, there are definitely some Facebook posts, not a lot, because I started, in college, I was competing in pageants. And so that put me underneath the microscope. So there were lots of things I just couldn't do. Right. But I started deleting a lot of things. I think probably like last year, I just started going through, and anything that I felt like might be remotely, like, I had to play devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. And so I had to just start deleting a lot of things, just because I didn't want to deal with any backlash. You understand? And much like you, someone who is in the education industry, I had to go make a public page, because for a while, I only had my private page, and I was pushing everything through my private page. And I was doing that because as a teacher, I don't need my students to be able to find me.
Right.
You can't find me. If you Google search me, you cannot find me through a Google search. That's highly intentional. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, I've seen teachers get fired for less. Mm-hmm. So it is a slippery slope, and you do have to do a lot of editing. And I'll say the beautiful part of that is, but I think that's anybody in their career. The Oprah Winfrey we get on OWN is not the Oprah Winfrey we were getting on Channel 8 on ABC through the 90s. It's a different Oprah. Mm-hmm. She wasn't talking about the dark skin and light skin dichotomy in a documentary. She wasn't, Iyanla Vanzant didn't have a full-time show. And if you know, 90% of the families Iyanla works with, their Black families. I don't think that's a coincidence. Mm-hmm. Oprah Winfrey just has a lot of things like Black Love that comes on OWN, right? Where it celebrates Black relationships and Black marriages. That wasn't on her regular daytime talk show, right? And so I think when you get more ownership, that's when you really get freedom, to be quite frank. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, you have to be highly intentional, especially because people just want to find reasons to cancel other people.
So even not even just being an educator and talking about being canceled. So when I first started and I said, okay, I feel the change, right? I feel it, but now I need to be able to reintroduce myself to the world. So here was the birth of Concrete and Blossom. When it started, and I said, okay, well, I definitely got to get on more than just Instagram, because that's like my only social media is Instagram. Everything else is just way too much for me. I'm old. I'm not trying to deal with it, like whatever. So I knew Facebook, hands down, you got to get back on Facebook. Like, period, point blank. And I will say, since I've gotten back on, there has been a lot of good things to come of it, but it's still very overwhelming. So Facebook is like the least best way to get in contact with me, the least best way to kind of follow what I'm doing. It's just like the least best, but I'm getting there. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because, so I hadn't been on Facebook since 2015, which was my 10-year high school reunion. And I was on Facebook before then and everything was fine. But then I got on the committee of planning, because that's one of the things that I do is consult with planning and everything like that. And I'm one of those people who, if you tell me your vision and if you ask me for some creative juices, I'm going to put the 2 and 2 together and make sure that you have a really good event, right? And I started to go back and I uploaded that Facebook from that first Facebook, the Dawn Townsend Facebook. Sis, it got re-deactivated. Hurry up, turn it off. How do you turn this off? I had to re-deactivate, and I was just like, because there wasn't a way to mass delete everything. I couldn't figure out how. I don't know. There was just too many buttons, and there's buttons everywhere on Facebook. There's so many
advertisements for me.
There are just so much everything other than, I just want to delete everything. Can I just start over? Can you just take everything away? And the whole archive thing, nope, that means y'all can still just so happen to it just get out. It's archived in your database. I don't want it. I forget I ever said it. But there was so much of it. There was so much of it that I was just like, no, we're just going to start over from scratch. Leave it re-deactivated. Like, just don't touch it at all. Like, no, just. And so, yeah, even for the podcast world, it was like, starting a podcast, wanting to reintroduce myself in such a more poised way, I just couldn't. There were things that it's like, I said that? I wrote that? I said it? I wrote that? No way. Like, what was I even going through? Like, what was I thinking? How ignorant is that? You know, how uneducated is that? Like, even if those are still, let's just say maybe beliefs I have, the way that it was posed, the way that it was put out there was just so not who I want to be reflected as. And I didn't take it necessarily as a bad thing. I actually took it as, look how much you've grown. Like, you don't even want to be associated with that person no more. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. So when you come to me talking about how I was or how you think I am, or I'm this, I know who you're talking. You calling for the caterpillar, but I'm the butterfly. Like,
that part.
I'm going to need you to fly high with me. Otherwise, we just, got to disseminate this. So, yeah, like, even for me, it was like, nope, that old page had to go. We had to start from scratch. And I'm trying to get on this whole Twitter thing. I hear, like,
Black Twitter is its own universe.
I wasn't even going to bring in the black part, but I heard Black Twitter is, like, where you need to be.
So I have like a profile on Tumblr, and I don't even like post any pictures of me. I like Tumblr because it's just like, I feel like it's where all the creative kids hang out.
Okay.
And you can hang out.
Like blogging, right? It's
very much like blogging. And I like Tumblr because you can hang out anonymously in a way that you really can't on Instagram or Facebook. But Tumblr has a page called Black Twitter Post. And so I follow that page. And the screenshots alone, I'm just like, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, Black Twitter it's a force. Believe it or not, Twitter hired like a diversity person who analyzes Black Twitter posts. Like, Black Twitter is a thing. Like, people get discovered off Black Twitter. People, I've had so many jokes that I have just screenshot off Black Twitter. Like, I'll share in a group chat with my friends. Like, Black Twitter is highly entertaining. I have not stepped into the Twitter foray as well either, because one of my friends was like, you should get on Twitter. I was like, I probably should, but it's a lot, and it's always something new. Like, just when you master Instagram or just when you master Twitter, now you got TikTok.
And then the reels, like, I'm like, wait a minute, Instagram's still coming out with new stuff. How y'all gonna wait over here? Y'all got 2 and 3 different social medias?
Well, Instagram copies everything off of its competitors, right? So Instagram stories was birthed out of Snapchat. The Reels were birthed out of TikTok. I don't think they can compete with Twitter because Twitter is like, you have news companies that like follow Twitter that post Twitter on the 6 o'clock news. So that's going to be a hard, that's a hard competition.
But it does have the serious side. Like, I think that Instagram, just based on it being based on pictures, just that it started with just pictures. Because if I'm not mistaken, when Instagram first came out, it didn't even have like comments and stuff at first. It was just pictures. I want to say, I don't think that they always had where you could like do all those comments and likes and all that. I think you could just have the picture and just like it. And I feel like I got on Instagram a little bit after the wave. Just like I know for a fact I got on Facebook. I probably got on Facebook when other people's grandmas was getting on, because I've just always been a little bit behind on that social media. Somebody always knowing where you are.
You make me feel old. I remember when I was at U of H was not even on Facebook. I remember
even there. I know.
It wasn't. I remember this was like, let me think. I was a RA at Cullen Oaks, girl, the on-campus, girl, the stories I can tell about the being RA. Listen, that's the real podcast. Okay.
At Cullen Oaks, because I was on the 3rd floor there.
Yes.
I saw you and Ashley there.
You probably did. Probably did, yeah. So I remember you had to email whatever their about page you had to email them, and it had to be, I think, a certain number of emails before they would give your college access to Facebook, because back in 2005 when I got on it, you had to be you had to have a college email address.
Yes.
It had to have a .edu or .org. Mm-hmm. And Facebook looked very different back in the day when everybody was on college too. And that's not a conversation people really want to have. But when Facebook was open only to college students, it was a very different place than what it is now. I think it has its pros and cons, because that's from a business perspective, obviously, right, it increases their revenue. But on the flip side, it also kind of changes the makeup, the layout, the energy of the site.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So how do you think that we can move forward and create sustainability, specifically in the Black community, with all these things that with what we talked about, right? Like the political, trials and tribulations that we go through as a company, the feminist movements and everything that we haven't even really just dug deep into, but Black men, straight men, and their stance on just one topic, but specifically all of that being put back into the Black community. How would you think that we could create more sustainability of growth and improvement?
I think financial freedom is our only hope, to be quite frank. I think we have been asking the powers that be to understand, acknowledge, respect our humanity for centuries. And not much has changed. It just reappears in different forms. So the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So at this point, we have to begin to ask ourselves, are we operating from a lucid perspective? Respectfully, I would say no, right? Because all of these companies are making these wonderful PR statements about Black lives and how they matter. And that's fine. Show me your executive leadership board. Post that picture. Show me your interns that you hired this past summer. Post that picture. That's what I want to see. Because every major company, you have a public relations person. And as someone who majored in English, I fully understand the power of the written word. So I already know what they do. They craft very well-written statements, because guess what? I also ghostwrite for people. I've done a lot of statements like that. So I already know what they're doing. That doesn't impress me. What does your executive leadership team look like? What do your charitable donations look like? What does your internship team look like? What does your HR department look like? What programs do you have in place? Or better yet, can you list the HBCUs where you went and actively recruited graduates for entry-level positions? Can you do that for me? Because to be quite frank, like, as my grandmama would say, a pair of lips can say anything. Mm-hmm. So right now, all of these powers that be, they're saying some wonderful, I mean, it is beautiful. Like, kudos to your PR department. But what are you really doing?
Right. Your hands aren't doing any work behind it.
That part. So I think financial freedom would be our best route, because when you are financially free, I don't have to ask you to include me because I can create my own. And I think the other part of this too, we need to understand that the powers that be, they are very focused on diversity, but not inclusivity. And one thing that bothers me is that people are muddling those two terms. Diversity and inclusivity are two very different things. Diversity means that everybody who asks for a seat at the table can have a seat at the table. Okay. Inclusivity means that what I serve you on your plate is nutritious for you to eat. They're not inclusive because many people at the table leave malnourished, if fed at all, while some people leave in a gluttonous state because they've been able to overfill and overstuff themselves. And so what you end up doing is, because you're diverse and not inclusive, you allow a few people to cannibalize all the food and leave everyone else with nothing.
And I think that it's also noteworthy that a lot of these companies that claim to be diverse, you have to actually look at what diversity means when it's on that corporate scale. Because if they have a gay white man, he's considered a minority, and now they can consider themselves diverse. Even though he's white and even though he's a man, because he attributes himself to, because sexuality is something that now we can attribute ourselves to and call that a group, which it is. So not to discredit, I don't want anybody coming for me.
Right.
But that's, to them, they can now say that they're diverse. If they have a first generation, let's say Indian or of somebody of Asian descent, they can now say that they are diverse. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's also very important that as Black people, we start to realize these companies are not diverse when it has to do with us. These places are not diverse when it has to do with us. Again, let me say it, and I'll get a little bit quiet because I'm already loud, but y'all, it doesn't have anything to do with us when they say that they're diverse. And I think so many times people, they give credit to these companies and then they don't want to stand behind that thought process. And what I mean by that is when everything started to fall down and with the pandemic and everything started to close down, and when the death of George Floyd happened and there was an immediate uproar, I almost feel like that stamina it's already died down.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So like when I said, okay, for the rest of the year, all my dollars is Black, I really meant that. So yes, I'm seeking out specifically. Now, have I spent money elsewhere? Obviously, it's not that easy to just drop things that are at convenience stores that we don't have any Black people serving in our areas or whatever yet. We don't have any Black gas stations if I just need to run and get something really quick, or we don't have any Black grocery stores anywhere near me in Dallas that I can run and, grab my groceries or anything like that. So, but for the most part, I'm trying to do my due diligence at seeking out specifically. So if that means I have to drive a little further, so be it. If that means I have to spend a little more, so be it. But my dollars need to be fed back into the Black community specifically, with nothing in return besides the same product that I would be getting from someone else. And I think that has just died down. And I think that people don't realize that, man, these companies, they wasn't created for us, and they definitely not by us.
This is true. And I think the companies and this country at large, they wait for us to die down. Mm-hmm. They wait for us to let up. That's what they wait for. Because unfortunately, history has taught them that this is the trend. This is the phase. Ride the wave. And when it's all said and done, things will be back just as they were. Mm-hmm. And one thing I will say, though, as a Black screenwriter, as a Black creative, I'm definitely using this time to my advantage, because pretty much all these Black production companies are coming up, all these Black screenwriting competitions are coming up, so on and so forth. So I am very much using this opportunity to stay on top of those things and apply for those things and become part of those different avenues, because I do think it's highly critical. I do think it's highly important, because when you look at breaking into the film industry. Like even the implicit racial bias that's embedded in that. It's mind blowing, but it's also where we are. You know, this is where we are. But I just feel like for Black people, listen, the best thing that we can do, just make financial freedom your goal. Like seriously, make financial freedom your goal, because money insulates you from a lot of day-to-day stresses. Money also gives you the power to choose. Money also gives you the power to create without boundaries. So I would just say, look, make financial freedom your goal. You know, there's this Black woman I follow on TikTok. She lives in Montana. Her and her husband got 41 acres. They don't have to be bothered with people. They have 41 acres, and she has a homeschool business. And I think what she essentially does is she sells curriculum to people who do homeschooling. It's a lucrative business, especially now. Yeah. And I don't know what her husband does, but he does something else too. I forgot. But they got 41 acres. You understand? So when you start making a certain amount of money, you don't have to be bothered. I don't have to keep asking you to respect me. You know, and I'm on a personal level, like, I'm only going to ask you so many times to respect me before I stop dealing with you.
Yeah.
You know? And so,
and I think that's really beautiful. And I really got to interject there, just because I have, in the latter years, I would say the last 4 at least, since about 2016, I had some traumatic events happen during that first quarter. That first quarter of 2016 was probably the worst quarter out of all 30 some odd years I've been here. But I really gathered the understanding of how much peace I didn't have. The shift to quickly get there, because it was do or die. It was when you're that far out of whack. The mind is a beautiful thing, but the mind is also a very, very, very articulated thing on its own. So it can take you some places. And just in that finally getting some peace about me, I'm not going to demand respect from me. Now, I may ask you once, maybe twice. That third time, I'm going to have a little high pitch. And you're going to notice about my last time. But I'm not about to demand respect from anybody. I'm just not going to deal with you. And it's so weird, because I don't care who you are. I know people hear this a lot and they're like, that's trash. But you could be my family. You could be the bestest of friends. Any of that. I'm not going to have to, if I have to demand respect from you, or keep having a conversation about what respect looks like and the boundaries of what I'm willing to accept and what I'm willing to give. If that has to be a constant conversation, then we can just call it a wash, and we can just sip our cups of tea on separate ends of the coffee table. It's okay. And it's okay. When you move from a pure place and you have that peace, I was just talking to another friend about this morning, actually. When you're moving from a pure place, you can be in peace. Because see, I don't feel like that's selfish. I don't feel like that's crazy. Like, I have I have a sibling that we literally, like, we don't speak. We could be in the same room, in the same home, just during holidays or whatever that may be. We don't really celebrate holidays like that, but it is a time that family has off and we can get together. But even then, it's like, but there's no tension moving around, if that makes sense. And that's because it's peace there. You know what I mean? And when you move from such a pure place, you can move like that. So when it comes, especially, and I feel very comfortable saying it, especially nowadays, when it comes to these white people, YT, no, I'm not going to demand respect from you. If you're not going to give it to me, we're just not going to deal with each other.
And listen, I think, to be honest, and we're really going to have this conversation, like, we've watched our grandparents and older people go to their grave asking for respect. Right? And so I'm not going to keep, like, you understood me the first time when I asked you. You understand? Like, I'm going to bring it to your attention very humbly, very kindly, because I always allow room for human error. People can do things and be oblivious to how those things are perceived by other people. So, okay, like, hey, when you did this, you may not have intended to, but this is how I felt. This is how it was received on this end. And, I want to continue to be in communication with you, but this just doesn't work for me. I'm going to ask you one time. After that next time it happens, I've gotten to the point, I don't even know that I necessarily have conversations. I just, okay, I'm good. I'm done. Like, I'm good. We're good. Okay. Like, I know when to walk away, because you understood me the first time. you really like in real life, you understood. And what I had to come to realize is that unfortunately people just don't care. And that is the harsh reality that people don't want to, understand or receive. People just don't care. So I'm going to stress myself out and you don't care. No, that's not how this works. And so one of my goals with Kitchen Talk with LadyK is to monetize it, because I do want to be able to start creating financial freedom. Like, just because I can't keep asking people to respect me in professional spaces. I can't keep asking people to give me the same courtesy that you give other people. I can't keep asking people to stop nominating me to positions of power and then question my competency to fulfill the duties of position when you ask me to do these things. Like, I can't keep doing that. And I'm not going to be quite frank. So I'll play my position, learn what I can learn. And when God says it's time for me to move on, I move on. I have no problem saying goodbye. One of the best things that came out of me moving to Los Angeles, I learned how to resign. Because that idea of being at a job 10, 15, 20 years, and I know after the first year I'm miserable, I'm not doing that. So financial freedom, I think that's the answer to all of our Black. Just be financially free. Because if you notice, rich people don't have these problems. Rich people are not. You want to know why? Because they're financially free. And I would just say be financially free and lift as you climb. I think that's the best thing we can do.
The lift as you climb part, that's very important, because a lot of us, I won't say a lot of us, I take that back. Some of us, we climb, we're successful at the climb, but we don't reach back to live. Mm-hmm. Or even make sure that the ladder is down so someone else can climb up themselves. Even if I don't have to help you, even if I'm not going to extend my arm to you, I can at least make sure the ladder is down far enough for you.
Make sure the door is still open for you to walk through.
The door is still open. Mm-hmm. Make sure I didn't lock it behind me by accident. So.
I think one thing that I read somewhere on Tumblr, and it said, being college educated, believe it or not, even if you don't intend it to be, it is a form of classism. And if you're not careful, those degrees will have you looking down on the very people that you were supposed to be helping up. And that really sticks with me. And so that's why I commend people like Lena Waithe, who are constantly hiring Black and brown creatives. I commend people like Shonda Rhimes, who are constantly hiring Black talent, who are constantly working with other Black directors. A lot of people don't know this, but like Debbie Allen and Denzel Washington have directed episodes of Scandal. I commend people like Regina King, who have a 50% minimum for every project she works on. 50% of the people on that project have to be women, have to be people of color. Like, I think it's beautiful, and I think we do have to lift as we climb. People can say what they want to say about Tyler Perry. One thing they can never say is that he doesn't employ Black people. He employs all the Black people, both people who are known and those who are unknown. And that's been to his credit. He's created a lot of jobs for a lot of Black talent where, to be quite frank, there was none. So I think it's critical that we lift as we climb. I think it's critical that we make a way and we create a space for other people, because it's room at the table for everybody to eat. It's so that we're in a capitalistic society. It's enough money out here for everybody to be a multimillionaire.
Absolutely.
Literally.
Absolutely. Well, there is always room at the Concrete and Blossom table for this type of talk with LadyK.
Thank you.
Definitely, absolutely would love for you to come back anytime, even once you are big and blown up, and give us a little taste of that.
I love Dallas people, honey. I always eat back.
Come through. So yes, thank you so much for talking with us today. I want to respect your time. I've had you for about an hour, so I definitely want to respect your time.
Thank you for having me. I've appreciated this.
Absolutely. Are there any just last final thoughts you want to get out there? Let everybody know your social media handles, where they can find all your projects.
My social media handle is Kitchen Talk with LadyK. The other thing I would say to everybody is vote. Get out there and vote. Please vote. Please vote. Please vote. If you got a ballot in the mail, you can take that ballot to a polling place and drop it off. You don't have to put it back in the mail. You can take that to an actual polling place where people are voting in person, and you can drop that ballot off in person so you know it actually gets there. And the other thing I would say is regardless of what happens in November, just remember that none of this is catching God by surprise. And so I don't care what the world looks like. You still have the capacity. You still have the opportunity to be great and make excellence your standard. And don't let anything deter you from that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So listen, listeners, first and foremost, vote. And not once, just every 4 years. This is how we create hope. Policy is important politically and personally. Stay informed in every aspect possible so that you're able to make decisions based on logic rather than emotion. Not now, but right now, subscribe, follow, like, and share Concrete and Blossom Podcast and our co-host, LadyK. You can find her on IG at Kitchen Talk with LadyK. You can also find us on all social media and listening platforms at Concrete and Blossom Podcast. See and click links below or any bolded words throughout our episode description.
Don the Doll delivers.